There are going to be some major changes coming to Maplestory 2 very, very soon, and they released the producer blog for the State of the Game Week 6 last night. Now, last night I ended up making a video where I kind of just went through all the changes and all the stuff that they're planning on doing from the producer blog, but today what I wanted to do is talk about my personal opinion and my feedback on the actual changes itself, because the video that I made yesterday, I tried to keep it as informative and non-biased as I could, and I mentioned towards the end of it that there would be a second part, which is where I kind of get into my personal opinion and my feedback on the proposed changes that Nexon is making. So if you guys are out of the loop, if you haven't seen the producer blog yet, or if you guys don't know what these changes are, I would highly recommend doing one of two things. Either you can take a look at the producer blog yourself. I'll leave a link in the description. You can read over it. Or the second thing that you can do is just take a look at the video that I ended up making last night. It's a bit of a longer one, but I kind of go into all the changes in detail. This is a big one. There is a lot of stuff and a lot of changes that Nexon is proposing to make with Maplestory 2, so I definitely went into as much detail as I could. That's the last video up on the channel, so if you guys want to take a look at that before this one, I would definitely not watch this video if you guys don't know any of these changes yet, because you'll probably get a bit lost. Now, with that being said, let's get right to it, and I will also mention this as a disclaimer, is I don't normally end up making videos like this. I like to keep my videos as informative and non-biased as I can. That means not putting my own opinions into stuff, because that's just not really my style. But because Nexon is asking for the feedback from the community, and even Jungsu Lee reached out and asked me to provide my feedback on the producer blog, I thought that I would go ahead and do this. So with that being said, you guys might not necessarily agree with everything that I'm about to say, and that's totally fine. This is my personal feedback for the producer blog. If you guys disagree, I just ask you to keep an open mind and let me know in the comment section what you guys think about all this. So let's get right to it, and there's a couple of big points that I really wanted to mention and talk about in detail in this video. And probably the most controversial change that they are going to be making is to the revamping of the hard adventure dungeons. We are revamping the overall dungeon structure to enable players to choose which gear to farm, and also let players enjoy different types of dungeons to diversify overall gameplay. So that's kind of their statement and their goal. Now, really importantly, what I want to talk about a lot, especially when I provide my feedback, is what is Nexon's goal and what they are trying to achieve, and what is the change that they are proposing on making that's going to help them reach this goal. And that's really important, because I want to give a lot of praise to Nexon for one of those two things, and that is their actual goals and what they're trying to achieve. Because I will say that they are really on point with knowing what the community actually wants, and they're definitely reading the forums and, I don't know, maybe Reddit, but other just feedback people are giving to the game. They're definitely taking a look at it, and they definitely know what people want. I think the thing that I really wanted to talk about in detail in this video, though, is that even though they know what people want, the proposed changes that they are asking for might not necessarily achieve the goals that they're trying to reach. And that definitely shows a lot in this hard mode dungeon revamp. So first of all, brief recap: the dungeon gear score requirements will be changing. Before, all the hard mode dungeons had a gear score of 2100, and afterwards Fire Dragon and Labyrinth Halls are being lowered to 1800. Temple of the Immortals and Lubelisk are staying at 2100, and Beyond Link Triss and Rune Temple are being increased to 2800. But the really important thing, and the massive change that they are making to hard mode dungeons, is completely revamping the loot that you actually end up getting. And what they're doing is they're actually making it very similar to the way that you get loot from Chaos Raids right now. So before, from hard mode dungeons, the way that we have it right now is when you run a hard mode dungeon, you get one random piece of armor, and then you get one random weapon. Now, the piece of armor that you get might not necessarily be for your class, same with the weapon, but you'll still get one piece of armor and one weapon. So you'll get a headgear, top, bottoms, gloves, or shoes, and then you'll get one weapon. So you do get two pieces of gear, a weapon and armor, and of course you also get some accessory fragments. Now, after this change, that is going to be different. Instead of getting one piece of armor and one weapon, you're now only going to get specific types of gear based on the slot that gear is. So headgear, gloves, shoes, top, bottoms, weapons. You're only going to get specific gear for specific slots on your character from certain hard mode dungeons, and it's very similar to Chaos Raids. So Chaos Raids right now, Shadow Altar gives you headgear, gloves, or shoes. Then the second Chaos Raid will give you your other two pieces of armor, the top or the bottoms. And finally, the third Chaos Raid, which we don't actually have available right now until the end of November, that's the one that gives you your weapons. They're proposing on doing something very similar with Chaos Raids, except for hard mode dungeons. So Fire Dragon and Labyrinth Halls will give you a headgear, gloves, or shoes. Temple of the Immortals and Lubelisk will give you a weapon. Interesting to note, very important as well, is that it won't be a random weapon. You'll actually get your choice of a Merpagoth, a Rune, or an MSL weapon, and you'll see why this is an important thing to note in a second. And Beyond, Linktriss and Rune Temple will give you your top or your bottoms. So if you go back and you take a look at the goals that they're trying to reach, we are revamping the overall dungeon structure to enable players to choose which gear to farm and also let players enjoy different types of dungeons to diversify overall gameplay. I'd say they're definitely working on improving one of those things, which is enable players to choose which gear to farm, so they don't want people to feel like there's as much RNG when it comes to their gear drops, because before, when you get an armor drop, it could be any piece of armor. After this, now you're kind of separating it into two halves. You've got your headgear, gloves, your shoes, or your top and your bottoms. The second goal, though, this is the one that I feel like is the real issue here, and also let players enjoy different types of dungeons to diversify overall gameplay. So the problem with this is just the way that gear progression works in Maplestory 2. The way that gear progression works is people are always going to be farming way more weapons than actual armor. It's because for several reasons, but the main one is you just need so many copies of your weapon to enchant it past +10, and enchanting your weapon to a certain point is such an important and crucial part of your character progression. Obviously, you could do the same with armor, but it's just not as important. People are always going to focus on enchanting their weapon because it just gives you so much extra power, and because of that, people are going to be farming multiple copies of weapons to be able to enchant it. And because of that, people are just always going to be focusing on where the weapons drop the most, more than the armor. So because the weapons after this update are still only going to end up dropping from 2 different dungeons, all this is really going to do, and I'm really generalizing here, I'm not saying that this is the only thing that's going to happen, but generalizing here, what this is going to do is it's going to shift the focus of what people are running right now, which is Fire Dragon. It's going to shift it to a dungeon like Lubelisk, because you only end up getting weapons from 2 different dungeons. People are really going to be trying to get as many copies of weapons as they can, and it's just going to shift the focus to a different dungeon. So it's not going to really achieve the goal that they have of getting players to go out there and diversify all the dungeons. It's just going to shift the dungeons that they run now to something else. And speaking of Fire Dragon, they actually mentioned this somewhere in the post, is that people are just running Fire Dragon so much. Well, the reason why people are running Fire Dragon so much isn't necessarily because Fire Dragon is the quickest or the most efficient or even the easiest dungeon. It's definitely one of the easier, quicker, and more efficient ones, but definitely not the biggest one. The main reason is because they ended up making the before they ended up making the change to the Chaos Raid weapons, each of the different weapons would only work in one of the Chaos Raids. So everybody started getting their Merpagoth weapons thinking that they would need this for the first Chaos Raid, Shadow Altar. It wasn't until later on that they changed it so that all of the hard mode dungeon weapons worked in all the Chaos Raids. But by that point, a lot of people had already farmed a really good Merpagoth weapon. They already got really good bonus attributes on it, or they already started enchanting it, and they didn't want to start over on a completely new weapon. So it kind of just kept the chain going of people running Fire Dragon, is because that kind of just was the way that it was. But yeah, this is mostly just going to shift the focus to running Lubelisk. And I guess if I were to propose a change or a correction to this and kind of solve the second part of the equation that they want to do, which is to diversify the dungeons that people run, well, because people are always going to go where the weapons are, I think that weapons should drop in all of the different dungeons. So if they feel like having a full weapon drop every single dungeon run is too much, I mean, that's very similar to how we have it right now. Of course, you might not necessarily get a weapon for your class, but you still get a weapon every single drop. Maybe have it so that you get a weapon drop 50% of the time or 75% of the time, but making it so that the weapons will only drop from 2 out of the 6 hard mode dungeons, we're just going to run into the same problem that we had before. So that's the main thing that I wanted to end up talking about when it comes to the revamping of the hard mode dungeons. A few other things as well. They ended up making some massive changes to Chaos Raids. I'll talk about that in a second. They also ended up making some changes to Onyx and enchantments and daily missions. I'll just go over this quickly. So when it comes to Onyx, they're making it so that dismantling enchanted gear is now going to give you Onyx that is bound to character. And same thing as before, the goals that they have for doing this is they want to combat meso sellers, because with so many unbound materials, it's really easy for meso sellers to farm a ton of these. Prices go down, the supply goes way up, the demand is still low. So prices go down, and when prices are really low, it means that people can buy a whole bunch of this stuff really cheaply. It doesn't really take that many people a long time to farm this stuff, and if people can end up completing their gear by buying a bunch of onyx or materials really, really cheaply, then people are going to end up essentially just getting their goals done with the game a lot quicker, and people are going to end up quitting way sooner than they normally would. So making stuff bound, it really does improve the longevity of the game. I know that this is something that might be a little bit strange if you're looking at it from somebody who just plays the game normally, but from like a developer standpoint, the more that you make things bound and the less access that people have to trade stuff, the longer it improves the playability and longevity of the game. Now, when it comes to their goals and what they're doing, I feel like it's not a bad change, but maybe instead of making it bounce to character, maybe make it bounce to account. I think that this would still accomplish all the goals that they have when it comes to Onyx, but now you're not punishing players for playing alt characters. So it still have it would solve all the issues that they have with Mesa sellers and improving the longevity of the game. You know, if it's still on the same account, you can't trade it, not going to run into those problems. But now you don't really feel like you're punishing people who want to play more than one character. So that's a really simple change that I think that they could end up doing to that. Daily missions, I think that a really big thing that they've had in mind when it comes to the last producer blogs is making it feel like people don't have to log in and play every single day. So a big theme is there's a lot of stuff to do and a lot of stuff that you can do, but if you end up missing a couple of days a week, or you have a busy schedule and you can't play a lot on certain days, but you can play a lot more on other days, you could still kind of get as much stuff done as you would normally be able to. So one thing that they ended up doing is making the change to dungeons. Before, you could run 10 dungeons a day, total of 30 dungeons a week. Well, then they ended up making it so that you could reset your dungeons on one character per account. So now you can run 60 dungeons per week, but you can still only run 10 dungeons per day. So what that means is you have to spend 5 out of 7 days a week running dungeons, because of course the day that you reset it, you can run 20. Afterwards, they ended up making it so that now you can run 15 dungeons a day. So now instead of having to run dungeons 5 days a week, you only have to run dungeons 3 days a week if you want to, because you can do 15, then you can do 15 on day 2, reset it, do another 15, and then on day 3 you can finish up and do your last 15 for a total of 60. They want to do the same thing with daily missions. So instead of having to log in every single day to do your daily missions, now you only have to do 30 of the daily missions, but it's on a weekly basis. So you essentially have to do 3 days worth of daily missions, but you have the full week in order to do it. So I don't think that this is a bad thing at all. I think this is fine. They tell you the approximate number of resources that you're going to end up getting. It seems to be pretty similar to the amount of resources that we have right now. It might even be more, actually, but it doesn't seem to be a nerf, at least not at a first glance anyway. Who really knows? Maybe it is when it comes out, but at first glance, it seems to be totally fine. The resources from the daily missions are also going to be bound, but they're bound right now, so that's fine. Sky Fortress, we won't really know too much about this until later on, so I can't really give too many comments about that. But another thing that I did want to talk about is the massive changes that they are making to Chaos Raids, because this is a big one. So after the update, there's going to be 2 different versions of Chaos Raids. There's going to be normal mode Chaos Raids and hard mode Chaos Raids. Now, the Chaos Raids that we have right now are the hard mode Chaos Raids. So we're not going to be getting more difficult content. There's going to be an easier version of Chaos Raids. It's like the learning version. And there's a whole bunch of things about it that are different. A lot of them are the same as the original Chaos Raids, but of course they are going to be easier. They aren't going to give you as much loot. And also, it's going to be a 6-player group instead of a 10-player group. I think that this overall, I think it's fine. I think it's actually a good thing. I know that a lot of people who sell dungeon runs are not going to be very happy, because now there's not going to be as many people buying dungeon runs if you can run an easier Chaos Raid to get legendary gear. But if you take a look at the rewards, they even said approximately 37% of the rewards compared to hard mode. So that's less than half the rewards. And when you take a look at the rewards that you get, instead of getting full pieces of gear, you just end up getting 5 fragments. And you need a lot of fragments. I think it's 30 or 40 in order to make a single piece of gear. So it's definitely significantly less rewards, and there's still plenty of incentive to run regular hard mode, or I guess the regular Chaos Raids that we have now, which afterwards will be the hard mode version. I think that if the only little change that I would end up making to this is they want to have it be 6-player, I would personally keep it as 10-player, because if their whole goal is to make it so that people kind of learn the regular Chaos Raids, and it's like I guess in a way, a trial version of it, you want to try to keep as many of the aspects of it as similar to the original Chaos Raid as you possibly can. And I would say that keeping it 10 players is probably a good idea, because that'll give people, even if you decide to do the easier version of it, you'll still feel like you're in the same 10-player environment, which will be a good learning experience for people when they do transition into the harder version of the Chaos Raids. Besides that, they did mention that the third Chaos Raid won't actually have an easier version of it, so the legendary weapons are still going to be very, very challenging to get, especially at first. But I don't think this is a bad thing. I think that this is overall just an improvement for the game, and I think it's good that they picked the reward level so that it doesn't feel like people who read the harder version of it didn't really kind of get a slap to the face by just releasing an easier version of it very soon afterwards. The fact that it gives less than half the rewards still gives plenty of incentive to run the more difficult version. Besides that, there's some other little changes as well. Priest skill changes. I'm sure a lot of people are happy about that. Always working on Mesa sellers. The guild changes, very looking forward to that, especially for the Salty Guild. The PvP as well, I guess we'll just have to wait and find out and see before I can kind of give more feedback on this. I've never really been too big of a PvP person when it comes to games like Maplestory 2. Just not my personal style, but I'm sure plenty of people will enjoy it. So the main things that I wanted to provide feedback on was the hard mode dungeons and kind of the issue that they are trying to solve versus the reality of how I feel like the situation is going to turn out to be. Overall, though, as I mentioned towards the start of the video, really important is I feel like Nexon has got one of the 2 points just really they hit the nail on the head, and that is at least knowing and understanding what the community wants. They definitely seem to be taking a look at the concerns people have, the feedback people have, and they know what people want. I think the step that they need to work on with a lot of these changes, especially in this producer blog, is the implementations and the changes that they want to make, making sure that those are going to actually accomplish the goals that they are trying to reach. So again, this was a bit more of a personal video with my feedback, so a little bit different than I normally do. As I mentioned, if you guys disagree, that's totally fine. If you have any questions, comments, or anything you guys want to leave about the producer blog or any feedback that you guys, feel free to let me know in the comments section, and I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. So a bit of a longer video as expected, but hopefully you guys are able to understand a little bit more about how I feel about this, and who knows, maybe next one will actually listen to it as well. Thank you guys for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video and this style of video and you guys want more, consider leaving a like. If you're new to the channel and you guys want more videos like this in the future and want to get notifications for videos like this in the future, consider subscribing. And with that all being said, thank you guys once again. As I always briefly mention at the end of the videos, if you are interested in the November giveaway, we've still got about 10 days or so left. Feel free to take a look at the link in the description. Plenty of ways to enter, the 2 easiest of which be subscribe to the channel, which will give you 2 tickets, and leave a like on the video, which will give you a bonus ticket. It's going to be for a $50 Nexon NX or a $50 Steam gift card for Maplestory 2 merits. So good luck to those of you entering that. And a couple of videos should be popping up on the screen right about now, so if you guys missed out and you want to check out some other videos on the channel, feel free. But if not, until next time, this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.